Hello dear students and welcome back to K Gupta's online lecture series. In this video lecture we are going to talk about a poem by William Blake entitled A Poison Tree. This poem has a biblical reference. It is a didactic poem and this poem gives a strong message that everyone has to control anger, otherwise there would be destructive consequences in life. About poet William Blake, whose lifespan was 1757 to 1827. William Blake was an English poet. He is regarded as the most original of English romantic poets. Unfortunately, he was the most neglected and even thought as a mad person in his times. He was an engraver, artist, poet, and visionary. He wrote wonderful lyrics in his collections entitled Songs of Innocence and Songs of Experience, published in 1794. So there can be a question: who is the poet of Songs of Experience and Songs of Innocence? If a MCQ question is asked like this, who is the author of Songs of Experience and Songs of Innocence? Your answer will be William Blake. William Blake also painted scenes from the work of Milton, Dante, Shakespeare, and Bible. His works, classed as prophetic books, such as Visions of Daughters of Albania, Milton, Jerusalem. These are deeply philosophical, difficult, and long series of poems. He engraved, colored, printed, stitched, and sold these works with the help of his wife Catherine. Some of his highly appreciated poems are The Lamb, The Tiger, and London. It has become a kind of second national anthem in Britain. William Blake has become one of the most favorite poets in academic circles in the modern times. His songs of experience contain poems that appeal to modern readers and scholars because he takes a radical stand in questioning some of the schemes of God. A Poison Tree is a poem that discusses the emotion of anger and the consequences of the anger on the relationships when the anger is suppressed. This poem deals with the darker side of the human psyche. The speaker tells of how he talked to a friend about his anger. The speaker says he could talk to the friend about his anger, about his friend, and everything was fine. But he could not express his anger with an enemy. He could not do so what he could do with his friend. He could express the anger he has with his friend, and that anger disappeared. But when he has anger about the enemy in his mind, he could not express that anger to the friend. And that's why that anger kept in his mind, it grows and eventually it becomes a metaphorical tree with poison or with a poisonous fruit. The enemy or the foe ends up under the tree, and the result of that poisonous tree, that enemy ends up under the tree, destroyed by the speaker's anger, pent up anger. And the speaker seems okay about, he seems okay about this, but is there some doubt about the destructiveness of his anger? Early communication of anger seems the best way to deal with it. If we can communicate our anger, we can deal with it. But if we are not able to communicate the anger with anyone, that will grow up like a metaphorical tree with a poison fruit. William Blake's poem was written, this poem, A Poison Tree, this poem was written in 1794 and first appeared in his book Songs of Experience, which followed on from his earlier Songs of Innocence. So this poem, A Poison Tree, was written in 1794. It was first appeared in his book Songs of Experience. There can be a question. A poison tree was appeared in dash dash in Songs of Experience. So it is about the emotion anger. The society at that time was encouraged to bottle up emotions and to present a polite and unruffled persona to the world. The society at the time of William Blake was encouraged to bottle up their emotions, especially like anger, and to present a polite and uh, unruffled persona to the world, to show the polite and duplicate emotions when they have the anger in their mind. So it was encouraged at the time of William Blake to bottle up emotions to present the polite and unruffled persona to the world. Blake thought this approach unhealthy, which approach to bottle up emotions, to control emotions like anger. So this approach, according to William Blake, was unhealthy and he advocated a more expressive mode of being, especially with regard to potentially festering emotions. So he wants that emotions should be expressed, and especially emotion of anger should be expressed. It should not be bottled up. But if we want to control it, if we want to deal with it, then we have to express it with the friend or the foe or enemy. His ideas were against the prevailing attitudes of the church and state. The original title Blake had for this poem was Christian Forbearance, reflects this. So his ideas, William Blake's ideas, were against the church and the state. Many scholars now think of Blake as a forward-thinking individual, was ahead of his time, a visionary who might well have been very much at home in modern society with its emphasis on self-exploration of the psyche. So many scholars about him, they think that about him that he was a modern and visionary poet. He was ahead of the time. A poison tree uses metaphor, antithesis, and biblical associations to highlight the self-damage that can proceed from suppressing anger. The emphasis is on letting go of negative emotions and moving on with life before this energy impacts on the health and well-being of others. So according to William Blake, we have to remove our negative emotions and we have to go ahead in the life with the positive things, and we have to express the anger, we have to express the emotions, then only we can deal with it. Otherwise there can be, if we suppress our anger, then there will be destructive consequences in the life. First, I will read the poem, the text of the poem, and then we'll discuss the poem. I was angry with my friend. I told my wrath did end. I was angry with my foe. I told it not, my wrath did grow. And I watered it in fears, night and morning, with my tears. And I sunned it with smiles and with soft, deceitful wiles. And it grew both day and night, till it bore an apple bright. And my foe beheld it shine, and he knew that it was mine. And into my garden stole, when the night had veiled the pole. In the morning glad I see my foe outstretched beneath the tree. So this is the text of this poem. Now we'll discuss stanza wise. This poem will be discussed stanza wise. This poem is written in first person, narrated by the poet. The poet tells us about the feeling of anger. When he was angry with his friend, he simply told his friend about his anger. So, as we can see, every line of this stanza has two couplets. This stanza has four lines and two couplets. I was angry with my friend, I told my wrath did end. I was angry with my foe, I told it not, my wrath did grow. So the narrator is first person narrator, and he says, I was angry with my friend. The speaker was angry with his friend. And when he was angry, what he did? He said, I told my wrath. He told about his anger, wrath, anger. He says, I told my wrath did end. And the speaker says, when he was angry with his friend, he told about that anger, he expressed his anger. And because he had expressed his anger did end, his anger disappeared. I was angry with my foe, I told it not, my wrath did grow. But the case was different when he was angry with his enemy, he was angry with his foe. When he was angry with his friend, he expressed his anger. He told about his wrath, and that wrath did end. That wrath, that anger disappeared. But in the case of enemy, when he was angry with his enemy, he did not tell about his anger, and that anger grew more. And it is the human psyche. When we restrain, we suppress our emotions in mind, someday it will spring out, and there will be some consequences of suppression of emotions, of any type of emotions. In second stanza, the speaker says, I watered it in fears. So he watered it in fears. It means anger in fears. That he nurtured, He watered, he nurtured his anger in fears, night and morning with my tears. So he nurtured that anger night and day with the tears, with his tears. And I sunned it with smiles and with soft, deceitful wiles. When there was emotions of anger in his mind, he deceitfully he covered his anger with smiles. So it is said that anger was sunned, nurtured again, it was watered and sunned in with the smiles. The anger was sunned with the smiles, watered with fears, and with it was covered with the soft deceitful wiles. It was covered with the smiles, and that anger obviously grew more and more. Third stanza, and I grew both day and night till it bore an apple bright, and my foe beheld it shine, and he knew that it was mine. The anger concealed in the mind of the speaker, and because it was suppressed, because it was restrained in the mind of the speaker, it grew both day and night because it was watered and sunned with fear and the smiles respectively. And because it was a tree, it is extended metaphor for anger, and the tree of anger, because it was watered and sunned with fear and smile, it bore an apple bright. Obviously, that tree of anger had an fruit, and that fruit was like apple, an apple bright. And my foe beheld it shine, and he knew that it was mine. And the apple, the fruit to that tree of anger was very bright. It was a bright apple and attracted the enemy's attention. And he felt that the fruit belonged to the poet. So that fruit attracted the enemy of the speaker because he was an enemy. He wanted to take it from that speaker's garden, and he knew that it was mine. The final stanza. And into my garden stole when the night had veiled the pole. In the morning, glad I see my foe outstretched beneath the tree. In this final stanza, it is described how that enemy was attracted towards that apple, towards the fruit of that tree, which was the tree of anger. And obviously, as it may be a tree, as in the Paradise Lost or in a biblical story, in heaven, in the Garden Eden, when Satan made Eve attracted towards the prohibited apple, that Eve asked Adam to take that fruit, and they took that fruit from the apple tree in the garden of heaven. In the same way, that this enemy was attracted towards the fruit. It is the extended metaphor that he was not attracted towards the actual fruit, but he was attracted towards the metaphorical, that tree of anger, and the fruit of that tree. What kind of that fruit would be? Obviously, that fruit would be poisonous. And when enemy was attracted towards that poisonous fruit, he didn't know whether it was poisonous or not. And in night, when that night had veiled the pole, when that night covered the pole star, North Star, that enemy sneaked into the poet's garden and ate the apple from this tree. What was the consequences of this action? When an enemy entered into the garden of the poet or garden of the speaker, and when he ate that apple, that fruit was poisonous, because that uh, tree was also poisonous, and that's why that fruit was poisonous. And that's why when the enemy ate it, he died. And next morning, when his body was found lying under the tree, it is said, the speaker says, "In the morning, glad I see, he was glad to see the enemy was dead there under that poison tree." So, this is the metaphorical, extended metaphorical reference to the Adam and Eve and that prohibited tree, prohibited apple. So, the speaker and the poet wants to say that it is our responsibility to control our anger. It is not responsibility of others to control our anger. A Poison Tree is a short and deceptively simple poem about repressing anger and the consequences of doing so. The speaker tells us of how he fails to communicate the wrath with his enemy, and how this anger continues to grow until it develops into poisonous hatred, poisonous tree. And the speaker describes how, when he was angry with his friend, he talked to his friend about the issue, which helped him to overcome his anger. However, the speaker was unable to do so with an enemy, and this leads to develop a resentment and an even stronger degree of hatred. An extended metaphor of a tree growing in the speaker's garden demonstrates how the anger continues to grow. In the lines, "And I watered it in fears, and I sunned it with smiles," the speaker actively cultivates the tree of anger. So, the example of friend and enemy has given by William Blake. When the speaker has anger about his friend, he expressed it freely, but he could not express with enemy, and that's why he has to conceal it, he has to hide it in his mind. And because of this type of suppression of anger in his mind, that was converted into a poisonous tree, and that tree had a fruit that has also a poisonous fruit. And the consequences of this was very dangerous. Eventually, the anger blossoms into poisonous fruit. The enemy eats the fruit and dies, and the speaker seems to glad of this. How can one person be glad to see somebody's death? But the concluding lines, the speaker was happy to see the death of his enemy because his enemy was uh, dead under the poisonous tree. However, there is also a sense that they see the destruction or destructiveness of what has occurred. As the first line acknowledge, we can easily overcome our anger if we communicate it properly. If we want to deal with our anger, we have to communicate it. We should not repress it. The poet wants to say that we have to communicate our anger. Then only we can deal with it, otherwise, we could not. The influence of Paradise Lost and Paradise Regained of John Milton can be seen on William Blake. And the theme of the poem can be anger and suppression of emotion. A poison tree is an extended metaphor for the anger of the speaker. And the rhyme scheme of this poem, A Poison Tree, is extremely simple, with each quatrain consists two couplets. And the rhyme scheme of the poem is AABB. All of the rhymes are perfect rhymes, which together with the straightforward meter gives the poem an easy yet forceful nursery rhyme quality. A poison tree is a metaphor making the whole poem as an extended metaphor. When an author uses a metaphor, a comparison between two unlike subjects, throughout a long passage or even an entire poem, this extended metaphor helps to give a greater understanding as to how anger of the speaker grows. It grows like a plant, a tree. Also, it bore an apple, that is, the seed or root of the speaker's poison. A poison tree is an extended metaphor of the anger of the speaker. So, this poem gives the message that the person who has anger and is not expressed to that person, that can convert into poison in his mind, and the result of that poison in his mind can be a poisonous tree in his mind, and that can have a fruit like an apple. It can be a seed, it can be a root of the person's poison. So a poison tree is an extended metaphor of the anger of a person. Thank you, dear students, for watching this video. Watch this video again and again to understand this poem. Read the text and try to understand the message given by the poet, the theme of the poem. Do not forget to like and share this video. You can subscribe this channel to get more videos, more educational videos on this YouTube channel.